Talking about removing the internal organs from the body cavity of that deer in order to remove the potential contamination that might be coming from the internal organs where the shot has penetrated the digestive tract or penetrated into the lungs and the heart. We're going to remove that potential contamination. Also, we're going to be removing that heat source where that internal organs and the rest of the carcass are all 100 degrees Fahrenheit or above. We want to get that material out of the carcass, get air flowing through there to start cooling that meat as quickly as possible. So we have, very tasty, desirable, safe, meat that's going to be good and wholesome for our families. Realistically, all we have to do to remove those internal organs is to cut from the flank right here in front of the leg to the tip of the sternum. Just make an incision along the midline of that animal and take the internal organs out. It's a little bit challenging sometimes to reach in there and cut the heart and the trachea from the lungs and pull that material out. But if you're trying to reduce contamination of the carcass from the surroundings and you're going to be dragging that animal out, just making that incision right there is all you need to do to begin with. Once you've got that carcass out to where you've got more control of contamination, then if you want to split between those back legs to facilitate cooling, and in the case of a male deer, to remove the penis and the scrotum, by all means do that. If you need to split the sternum in order to facilitate cooling, by all means do that, but don't do that in the woods where you're going to be dragging it through a bunch of dirt and leaves. We talk about doing a nice clean job. This person here did an excellent job of cleaning this internal cavity of this animal out. By all means, once you've removed those organs, feel free to rinse that out with potable water. That'll get any contamination from your field dressing job as well as from the shot out of there so that you'll have a nice wholesome product as it's hanging until it can be processed by yourself or the processor. About the only thing that I would suggest that this person here could have done was there's fat covering these tenderloins that associated with the kidneys. Leave that fat on there because that's a nice protective layer for these nice desirable pieces of the tenderloin. If you keep that fat on there until the time that you're going to process it, and you peel that fat back, that's all clean. But if you maybe see on this one, there's a little bit of hair on there. It's not too bad. That's something that you could rinse off if you're processing it yourself. But a processor is probably going to trim that material off, so that's going to be a little bit less of the tenderloin that you're going to be able to get. With this deer here, this is something that the hunter is going to be having mounted for a taxidermy mount. And you can see that they stopped their cut right here at the sternum, and they did not cut the hide all the way down. If you're going to be wanting a regular shoulder mount for a deer, definitely do not cut through the hide right here. Yes, your taxidermist can fix it by sewing it up, but it's a lot easier for them, and they can make a lot nicer looking mount if you don't split that. If you're going to be skinning a deer that you're going to be having mounted, the only thing that is different about how you would skin one of these deer that you're going to mount compared to one that you're just getting the meat from is you need to make cuts that is going to preserve the quality of the hide for the taxidermist. If you're doing it yourself, you're going to take it and make a cut right along this line of the dark hair and the light hair all the way up to the armpit. And then you're going to make your knife incision towards the midline, right up like so. So that when you are skinning the carcass, you're going to take that hide down over the shoulder. You're going to take this meat, this hide that's here over the breastbone, and take that down without splitting it. You've cut up the leg and over to the midline. So you're going to be pulling the hide off this way, and then over the breastbone, and then off the rest of the legs. That way you're not cutting that hide in a way that's not going to make it usable for the taxidermist. This deer was field dressed in a manner such that, you know, they only made the incision to the sternum, but because of the job that they did field dressing, you can see that there's a fair amount of digesta contents that's here on this exposed meat. And it's in the internal cavity and it's on the tenderloins. That's something that's going to have to be trimmed off for food safety, not just washed off. So by you doing a job of field dressing that cuts into that digestive tract, you're contaminating meat that is wholesome and is a good food source for you. Now you've turned it into garbage. The other thing on when you're field dressing a deer, you do need to go ahead and remove the anus. When you're field dressing the animal, it's also important that you remove the anus, the bung of the animal. It's easily done by taking a sharp knife and just cutting vertically around that anus. You know, you're not going to be really hurting any meat because the pelvic bone encircles that. So you just go right around that and keep your knife vertical, and you should be able to cut the muscle tissue and the digestive tract loose from the carcass, so that when you go to remove it, you can just reach in there, get a hold of that large intestine that goes up the anus, and pull that right through. If you don't want to pull it through, then when you remove the penis and the scrotum on this buck here and take that tissue on back, you can cut through the pelvic bone, which will make it easier for you to take the anus and large intestine out from that pelvic bone area. We talked about in field dressing that you don't necessarily need to cut the sternum. By all means, if you need to, in order to get the lungs and the heart out because of your skill level or because of ease, that's fine. But you can see that this area right here is usable meat that you've now contaminated and is going to have to be trimmed out. So if you're trying to get as much meat as you can, don't make this cut through here, at least until you get back to your home where you can have a source of potable water that you can make that cut in a clean manner and get it rinsed off to keep as much part of this carcass as usable meat. And definitely, if you're going to be saving this animal for a taxidermy mount, do not cut that sternum like that.